That's why I applaud Global Watch and their efforts to stop racism in sport and keep it out of our lives. Global Watch. We need it.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Still broadcasting from Emperor's Palace. Things really heating up here at the moment, I can tell you. In fact, it's heating up so much that we've lost all of our cameras to inside the venue, setting up so that we can catch the address of our President Jacob Zuma, who's going to be opening today's proceedings, and we're hoping to bring that live to you right here on SABC News. It would be interesting to see the perspective that the President does take on this particular initiative called Global Watch. I've been seeing so many role players coming in. I just saw a friend of mine, Cass Naidu, which we know very well from Radio 2000 here at the SABC, and also someone who is doing so much for sports, or women in sports. In fact, the G Sport Awards coming up this coming week, and we look forward to hearing about that as well. I also saw Anand Singh. He walked in here. So there are just a lot of people that are being represented. But my guest that I'm speaking to now is possibly one of the highest profile guests that are attending here on a global level. It's Mr. Wilfried Lemke. Now, he is the advisor to the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. It is so good to have you. Thank you very, very much for being with us. A conference like this, Global Watch, what does it mean for the United Nations to be represented here?
Well, first of all, it is very clear that the United Nations play a very important role in this issue. We have many declarations on different fields of the world, but we have to implement these things, like former President Mbeki yesterday said here at the forum. So this is very, very important, and I really appreciate this initiative, starting here in South Africa, to make it happen.
Yeah.
Not only to have a big conference, we have a lot of big conferences around the world, but now the next steps are very, very important. So I'm looking forward for this day. What is the next step? How can we communicate with 193 member states of the United Nations? How we can deal with FIFA, with IOC, and all the other world federations of sport? What can we do? But what I said yesterday is very important. Don't look only at the sports people. If we are talking about racism starts in our families,
yes,
in our neighborhoods, in the peer groups, in society. So that must be the focal point. What we see right now, sometimes, fortunately not all the days, in sports is not something that happens through sport, but it happens in sport.
Yeah.
So we have to fight against racism in all our communities.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so true, because the United Nations obviously focusing in on all forms of racism, not just in sport, but all around the world. And something that I have picked up from every single one of my guests is that it comes from the communities. The racism is not something you're born with, it's something that you learn. So what does the UN do to try and get to the bottom of this?
So we only can give advices to the governments. The governments then, they have to implement these things. And I said we not only should look at the officials, but we should do ourselves things. What does it mean? Education is the most important thing all over the world, not only in South Africa or Africa, all over the world. If we take the right steps, for example, what Human Rights Council said, we have to work on curricula, that we really make sure, and I'm quite sure that not in many member states we have this point of view in our curricula, that we organize for our schools, for our education, to know about problems of being isolated, excluded. And this is not only a question of racism. This is also how we deal with our people with a disability. In many countries, they are still locked at home, are not allowed to go on the streets. So we also have to fight against this kind of discrimination.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I think the word that we need to use a lot more here in this conversation is discrimination, because it's not only racism that exists in sports, it's all forms of discrimination. In fact, I was talking now to our South African female football captain, and the challenges that she's had to overcome to get to that position are immense. And a lot of women in sport also all over the world still go through these type of issues of discrimination due to the fact of being a woman, some due to the fact of their sexuality, things like that. So the battle is a lot bigger than just racism.
Absolutely, and this is what I try to tell you with my example with persons with a disability. But we have other examples like you just said, and we have to be focused on another word, inclusion. Inclusion, I don't know if this is, if you understand it in the right way.
Absolutely.
And so we have to start in our kindergarten, in our schools, at university, wherever we are. We have to say, is everybody included? Because it is a big, big punishment for our children, for example, if somebody is not included in the class, in the group, in the peer group. If somebody's out, this is a big, big punishment for them. And so we have to try to do our very best, and we have to start, I just said it, in our families.
Yeah.
If we have this kind of thinking, oh, this girl or this boy from the neighborhood, don't play with this guy, they are coming from another country, they have another religion. We have to start in our own families. And we should not just be silent if somebody said something bad about neighbors or other peoples from other countries, other religion. So we should intervene and say, listen, this is not very nice, because if you one day have to leave your country and are in the same situation, you want your children to play with others and not being excluded and isolated.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that. I'm glad you spoke about religion as well, because the discrimination that happens due to religion is unacceptable. We've seen it here at home as well, you know, with our South African cricket teams and captains, and we seem to be getting over it now, but it still is a very, very big issue. If we can just take yesterday, you were very much so a part of what happened here at the summit. You being the key advisor to the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Were you satisfied with what was coming out yesterday? I know today a lot rests on today, but just in a nutshell, yesterday's proceedings, are we on the right track?
Yes, of course, and I always love to be here in South Africa. Before I started this job, I've never been to South Africa, and now I've been here several times, and what is very, very positive for me to see, I don't know if it's a true situation, but I see that I can feel really the racism day by day. So when I go around the streets or marketplaces or discuss with people, not only high-ranked people, but also with my driver or with somebody who take care of me, we always discuss this kind of questions, and I really feel good here on behalf of this. The gap, or the problem in this country, for example, is the gap between the rich and the poor. And there, this must be also a very important priority for your government to change, because as long as this gap becomes bigger, it is very, very bad. So we have to fight on this as well. And for me, I love to be here, and especially through the World Cup here. That was excellent. Although many people were very much afraid that this will go so wonderful, and you are, the South African people were a wonderful host. So for me, most important from yesterday to today is, what are the next steps? We all know our work, but how can we implement all this big resolutions of the United Nations, and as well here of this Congress, we will have a paper and we will have a barometer. So this is a very good idea. I don't know who had this idea, but to watch what happens in the different 193 member states of the United Nations. That is quite a very good idea, because sometimes you have racism and you even don't let it be shown that you can see it. But this barometer, I think, is a very good idea, and we can then, after 1, 2, 3, 4 years, can see a development. That is, I think, a very good outcome from this Congress today. But as I said before, we have really to control everything and not going home and say, oh, it was a nice Congress, we had good people there. There must be a next step.
Fantastic. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I can see that things are starting to get very busy inside there, so I'm sure you're wanting to go in there and take your seat as well. But joining me here was Mr. Wilfried Lemke, as the advisor to the UN Secretary Ban Ki-moon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. All right, let's take a very, very quick break.